The I See Dead Plants podcast shares the stories of people and plants, pests and pathogens, and the conflicts among them. Join us as we speak to the folks who attempt to solve complex problems with plants through pest management research. I See Dead Plants is an extension-based podcast created by the Crop Protection Network and the North Central Integrated Pest Management Center. Music written and recorded by fellow plant pathologist Sean Toporek and hosted by Ed Zaworski.
Welcome back to the I See Dead Plants podcast. As always, I'm your host, Ed Zaworski. Today, it's a lovely Friday, and I've got my special guest here, Jerry Barron. How you doing, Jerry?
Good afternoon. What a great day.
So, just a little bit, we're going to be talking about the IR4 project. And if you're wondering what is the IR4 project, you're in luck, because we're going to tell you all about it today. So, just before we get to that, I'm going to do a little bit of background here with Jerry so that you guys can get to know him. So Jerry got his master's in horticulture and plant physiology at The Ohio State. He got his PhD in horticulture and weed science at NC State, and now he's currently the executive director of the IR4 project. So all that sound right, Jerry?
Yeah, and I'm very impressed that you called it The Ohio State, so you get bonus points for that.
I'm a Big Ten alum. I went to University of Illinois. I know how touchy people can be about the Ohio.
Yeah. Just don't mention anything about that team up north, okay?
That's fair. So, but yeah, as always, Jerry, I like to ask people some kind of get to know you questions for me, for my audience, So first one I got for you is you studied horticulture for your master's and your PhD. How did you find yourself getting interested in that?
It's actually a pretty funny story. So I grew up in the suburban rural interface of Northeast Ohio, outside of Cleveland. And when I was like 11, 12 years old, my next door neighbors, who would often take vacations, asked me to water their lawns while they were gone. So it was easy money. And for that age, it was great to get a little spending money. They had a landscaper there that came once a week to cut their lawn. And the landscaper asked me, hey, you want to work for me to do some help, totally against child labor laws, but this was back in the 1960s, so no one was really looking at it. So I ended up getting a weekend job working for this landscaper. So guess what? As most 11, 12, 13-year-old boys know, they follow football, right? And I followed it. I was a Cleveland Browns fan, but I knew my stuff about it. And he would take me to lunch during the lunch breaks, and we would go to his favorite bar. I drank, of course, soda, but he would ask me, who did I think was going to win the games? And I would always spout out, this team's going to win, that team's going to win. Well, lo and behold, he was making some bets on my advice. And he was winning lots of money. So this guy really wanted me to stick around and keep working for him because he found my knowledge base pretty good for this one. So he kept me employed. He kept giving me more and more responsibilities, a little bit more money. And next thing I know, I was working with him on the weekends as he was doing spraying. Again, not following the child labor laws, but I was assisting him in spraying fungicides, insecticides, and in some cases herbicides on these lawns. And I just got really interested in how can these products control these pests and how it does it and all that. So lo and behold, it really piqued my interest in plants. I kept involved in plants. And then when I graduated high school, I made a decision that I wanted to start a career working in some type of plant protection. That's when I applied for, entrance at Ohio State, it was part of the initial plant protection program that they had kicking off there. I was in plant pathology at that point, but I took a lot of entomology courses, a lot of weed science courses, and I just loved it. I kept working in it, and lo and behold, fast forward to this day, I'm still working in crop protection.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. How did you, it's kind of tricky before we get into what IR4 is, but bear with us, folks. But how did you bridge the gap between your studies and working for IR4? Was there a job opportunity right out of college, or did you do something else in between, or?
So no, I actually came to the IR4 project directly out of my PhD program. So I graduated from NC State, North Carolina State University, December 1985, and January 2nd, 1986, I started work for IR4. It's been my job my whole career. I'm pushing 40 years now. I'll January 2nd, 2026 will be, or excuse me, January 2nd, 2026 will be my 40th anniversary with IR4.
Nice.
Outside of a sabbatic where I served as associate executive dean at Rutgers University, that it's been my whole career.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it must be a pretty fun job. Keep you around.
It is. It's a very gratifying job. It's a very gratifying program to work at. It's funny because, you look at things over time and there's always challenges in any job, but there's really this job has been, a real blessing because one is we're helping growers solve some of their basic problems. Number two is we're helping keep our food affordable, the food that people eat directly. And number three is, we're transitioning products to, newest generation, safer products. So there's a lot of people that really do like the program. I don't get a lot of hate email for this program. There's a lot of love from a lot of different sources, including the environmental groups, farmers, commodity associations, as well as the research community.
That's great.
Yeah.
So I got kind of a weird one for the next question.
Sure.
I always kind of Google stalk people before they come on here just to see what I can learn about them and see what I can ask them about. And I saw in one of the biographies that was on, I think maybe NC State's website, I can't remember, but it said that in your spare time, you've run a lot of marathons and you've done some coaching for some marathons. So I wrote a question in here because I'm actually going to be doing my first marathon I've ever done coming up here October 6th, real quick. So I was going to ask you, if do you have any advice for somebody running their first marathon ever?
Oh, absolutely. So yeah, I do serve as a coach. I'm a Roadrunner Club of America certified coach. So I've been doing that for a while, but I focus a lot of times my coaching on high school athletes. I also focus it on what I call the stroller brigade, which is the young mothers after they've had their first or second child that they want to go out and start running again. But anyways, there is a wall. So here's the advice to you. There is a wall, but it's not insurmountable. There's a lot of people that, climbed that wall, got over it. For your first marathon, just go out and enjoy the ride. Don't worry about time. Don't worry about place. Just go have fun and make sure that you soak in every aspect of the event. Let me guess, October 6th, you said?
Mm-hmm.
Chicago?
Minneapolis.
Done on that. It's good. It's a good marathon.
Okay.
Beautiful time of year to run one, as long as they don't have any weird weather.
Yeah, I'm just hoping it's not going to be hot.
Yeah. But, prepare. Make sure that you mentally go through things in your mind, like what shoes and clothes you're going to wear and how you visualize being at 18, 19 miles. But you'll do great. It sort of reminds me a lot when we were in college, chemistry. Remember those chemistry classes?
Oh, yeah.
You couldn't cram the night before and expect a good grade in chemistry. Running marathons the same way. You got to do the work in advance. You have to do those long runs, allocate those times, whether it's Saturday, Sunday, or during the week to go out and spend that, 3 hours for that long run and get those miles in. But mentally, you'll be prepared. So, yeah, stick to it. You'll do good. I was asked one time what separates doing a marathon. It's persistence. In a word, it's persistence. You can do it. You keep going, you persist, and you succeed.
Before undertaking this, I've been talking about it for a number of years. I ran cross country and track all through high school and then a little bit into college. And, this was something that I had talked about for a long time, and now I'm finally getting to do it. And it used to perplex me why people would say that you didn't run the whole marathon before the marathon, and you limited the really long runs that you did. But I understand why, because man, they take a lot out of you for longer than you'd realize. So
Yeah. Well, not only do they take a lot out of you, but as you get beyond a certain time frame, your risk of injury gets higher and higher. Here's a little bit of coaching advice. What's your most important workout? Your next one.
yeah,
And what that really means is you want to make sure that you don't get injured, you don't get hurt, and you can continue to be consistent with your training and be ready to do your next run. So be careful on those long runs. Take them slow, take them easy. And again, just enjoy the ride.
That is exactly it. I've been battling my IT bands lately, or one of them. So I just got to take it easy and make it there. But I got one more for you before I move on from this, Jerry. What's your go-to meal the day of the marathon, like the breakfast before you go?
I don't usually eat much of a breakfast. I'll get like an English muffin and throw some peanut butter on during race day. But my go-to meal the night before, a lot of people go to the pasta feeds and all that one. I'm not a fan of pasta before a marathon. It tends to dehydrate me. It's just me. A lot of people do it. It's mostly the sauce. I tend to try to find an IHOP and get some harvest grain and nut pancakes. And usually when I get those pancakes the night before, the next day is a good day.
All right. I'll give it a shot.
Yeah.
I had nothing planned, so I like that.
Do it in training run first.
Yeah. Try it out, right?
Yeah.
If you like I See Dead Plants, make sure to check out some of the other CPN-affiliated podcasts like War Against Weeds and A Penny for Your Thoughts.
Drum roll, please, folks. Finally, we've come to, we've said IR4 several times. So, Jerry, can you just give us the mile-high overview? What is IR4 and what do you folks do at IR4?
Okay. Well, IR4, and I'm often asked this question, what does IR4 mean? So let me get that out of the way first. IR4 is a retired acronym that was used by U.S. Department of Agriculture many moons ago to name certain projects. It once stood for Interregional Research Project number 4. Again, that's been retired. And because of the name recognition, USDA has allowed us to keep the name IR4. So when you look at the congressional budgetary line, it will say Minor Crop Pest Management, parens IR4.
Gotcha.
So Congress knows us as that. USDA knows us as that. So we continue to use the name. Oftentimes people will say to me, well, why don't you get a more descriptive name? And they're spot on. But it's been one of those things. It literally would take an act of Congress to change our name. We got bigger fish to fry than changing the name. But we're pretty well known in the specialty crop research network of what IR4 is. So what is IR4? So IR4 is a government-sponsored program whose focus is to develop data to support the registration of crop protection technology on fruits, vegetables, nuts, herbs, and other specialty crops. Ornamentals is included that as well. We're needed because the chemical companies and the biopesticide companies focus their research and development areas on markets that provide rapid and sizable return on investment. So you can imagine that a company, say BASF or Syngenta or Bayer, they focus developing products for corn and soybeans and cotton and the small grains. They're not really interested in arugula. They're not really interested in watercress or asparagus or cardoon or whatever, these specialty crops. So I've been put into a place where we serve as a facilitator to develop the data, We do it within our own network of research sites, and then work with the companies to submit this to the Environmental Protection Agency to extend the existing product registrations to these small acreage specialty crops.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Just along those lines, what is the biggest hurdle, I guess, for specialty crop growers with regards to these chemicals not being released? Is it just because, I mean, you guys are doing the testing. Is that testing for like phytotoxicity on the plants? Is it testing whether or not they control the particular pests and pathogens on those plants? Or is it just, I guess what is the major hurdle?
Okay. So it is what you just said. It is efficacy and crop safety testing. That's one aspect of it. But IR4 we're probably better known for the development of residue data.
I see.
The major focus of the program is to develop EPA guideline magnitude of the residue studies. And that basically shows how much chemical and its appropriate metabolites remain in and on the crop at harvest. So basically our studies would be is we see how growers would want to use a particular pesticide on a crop. And then we would go out there in small plot research at various locations throughout the United States, perform these studies where the cooperating researcher goes out and grows the crop, makes the application of the product according to our research protocol. When the crop is mature, they'll harvest the crop. Sometimes, depending on the crop, they may have to send it to a processing laboratory where they'll make it into the appropriate components. So say, for example, it's tomato. They'll send a sample to a lab where they'll make it into tomato paste and tomato puree and tomato juice, or, grapes that make it into grape juice. But all that is eventually shipped to our network of analytical laboratories where they perform chemical residue analysis, and they'll determine how much of the pesticide remains in the crop. And we put all that data together and then submit it to the Environmental Protection Agency to allow them to perform a risk assessment. So they'll look at what type of exposure, what type of extrapolations they can make from their toxicological data, and determine, is it something that's safe to use on that crop, or is it something that it just doesn't meet the requirements, and they'll basically tell us no. Most of our projects end up in a registration, but not all.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd never thought about. I kind of on a basic level, I knew what IR4 did, but I didn't really know. Yeah, what the hurdle was. Why wouldn't a product be registered for broccoli, but it is registered for soybeans, and that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So, when did you may have said this already, but I can't remember. When did IR4 start up?
IR4 started in 1963.
Okay.
And so we just celebrated in 2023 our 60th anniversary. And it's pretty amazing because we're funded on an annual basis. So every year, Congress has to come back and refund the program. So 60 years as a year-to-year funded program, it's pretty solid. We're real proud of that one, that they can take a year-to-year program and continue it. So yeah, we have 60 years of legacy, 60 years of taking that approach of giving the growers tools to solve their problems. Obviously, over the 60-year period, things have changed. The products we work on now are much different. They're the reduced risk chemicals, more biopesticides, and all the exciting emerging technologies that are coming out.
That speaks volumes. 60 years, year to year.
Yeah.
Speaks to how important it is. So.
Yeah. And contrary to the rumors, I have not been with the project for 60 years.
Well, yeah, you told us almost 40. So
almost 40, yeah.
So, Jerry, what was a day? So you're the executive director of IR4 at this point. What is a day in your life like at IR4?
Probably the fact that what makes this job is so interesting is no day is the same. It could be that we're dealing with issues of how do we help this commodity group get a tool. In fact, this morning I was speaking to the Pennycrest Growers Association, and they're trying to see how can we get some products registered. So maybe most people know, or maybe not at all, but pennycress is a weed. But they've developed a new varieties that can be used as a climate smart agriculture, in climate smart agriculture. But now they're trying to use it as a rotational crop, say for after corn or after soybeans. They're coming to us and saying, we see tremendous growth in this crop, but we're going to have pest problems. And we need help to get these products through EPA. And the chemical companies or the biopesticide companies really don't have any interest in working with us right now. So that's maybe a common day in, day out thing that you're visiting with commodity groups and seeking and trying to strategize how you can help them. We could be dealing with a situation at one of our research farms. We have 21 research farms throughout the United States. Majority are connected with the land grant university system, but we also have some that are connected with USDA ARS. There may be an issue happening there. Say someone's going out on leave and they have these studies that are ongoing, or something's happened in the course of their study and they need some guidance how to continue the study because say an odd weather event happened. It could be something that we're getting calls from EPA to ask us to better explain what occurred during the course of a study. It could be an interaction with a crop protection company asking, going back and forth of what they're going to be doing with the product and what we can do with their products. So it's an extremely variable day, and it makes it fun. And that's why I feel so blessed that I've had such a long run with this organization, because it does not get boring.
Are you wondering which fungicides to use for a particular corn, soybean, or wheat problem? Check out the Crop Protection Network Fungicide Efficacy Guides. These guides can help you identify the best fungicides for the disease you are battling.
Well, like you said, 40 years, you're still doing it, and it sounds like any job that you get to. I worked in a diagnostic clinic here at ISU for a while, and it was a similar thing. No day was the same.
Yeah.
And it keeps you on your toes. Keeps you interested.
Yeah, absolutely. And, some days you have to pinch yourself and say, wow, I'm getting paid to do this. Yeah. And other days it's like, oh boy, I should have gone out for a run this morning.
That's every job, right? So you mentioned, I didn't know before you said what the acronym, what does it stand for? Interregional. And you just mentioned the 21 research farms across the United States, right? So is that the scope of IR4? Is there anything international that you guys do?
Yeah. So I mentioned the field research farms, and, again, most of those are with the land grant university system, but we also have some of the ARS. What I didn't mention is we have a network of analytical labs.
Okay.
So we have analytical labs. One's connected to the University of California, Davis in the environmental tox department. Another one is with the University of Florida with the food science department. And then we have two analytical labs that are associated with ARS research sites, one in Wapato, Washington, and the other one in Tifton, Georgia. In addition to that, we have 4 regional offices in Michigan State University, University of California, Davis, University of Florida, and then we have the fourth one is with an 1890 institution in the Northeast region, University of Maryland, Eastern Shore. And I just threw out an acronym. 1890s is a historically Black college and university.
Gotcha.
So, University of Maryland, Eastern Shore is part of it. In addition to that, and there's more, I should say, ARS has a coordinating facility in Charleston, South Carolina, that coordinates all the IR4 activity within their umbrella. And then the national headquarters is at North Carolina State University. You asked about international. So I'm going to say it was probably about 12, 15 years or so ago, we started hearing rumblings that U.S. growers wanted greater access to international markets. And one of the problems, and this is specialty crop growers, one of the problems they were having is the crop protection products they used in the United States legally, following the label, all that. Sometimes the amount of pesticide residues remaining in this crop were not harmonized where they wanted to export the crops. So this was brought to our attention. We started having some interactions of trying to say is, how can you solve this problem? We opened up a whole slew of international activities. So we were, really spending a lot of time trying to develop the platform that we could go ahead and try to solve this problem for the U.S. growers. In the intermediate, we received a grant to establish what was called the Minor Use Foundation. From this grant, we went out there and we established a not-for-profit foundation that was basically supposed to duplicate the efforts of IR4, but on an international basis. So people in multiple countries throughout the world would have the ability, the knowledge base, as well as the resources to conduct residue studies just similar to what they were doing with IR4. From the international standpoint, I was the first chair of the Minor Use Foundation. I still serve on the board, but now the Minor Use Foundation has evolved into an organization that is rather large in scope, operations in many countries, a lot of work with developing countries to teach them how to do residue studies, as well as taking the data and mashing it with IR4's data, and then going into the international regulatory authorities such as Codex and European Union, and so on and so forth to get harmonized registrations. I neglected to mention something very important in there. So I said 12, 15 years ago, but even prior to that, we were working very closely with Canada. So it's been about 27 years, actually, we've been working with Canada. And, it makes a lot of sense because Canada is truly the U.S.'s number one trading partner. A lot of fruits and vegetables cross over the border. And, we were going out, we were getting all these new registrations of new products, new technology, and Canada just was back there saying, what's going on here? Why can't we get it? So the growers in Canada influenced their government to make an investment and develop an IR4-like system up there, which they did. It's called Pest Management Center. It's based in Ottawa as part of Agriculture and Ag Food Canada's operations. We were very much involved in consulting with the Canadian government to help them establish this program. They modeled it exactly after IR4. And to this day, we do probably about 25 to 30% of our work jointly with Canada. So that way that U.S. growers and their counterparts in Canada have basically simultaneous access to the same products. It takes away the non-tariff trade barriers between the two countries when it comes to fruits and vegetables, which basically means is if a grower in Florida is growing tomatoes, they want to ship it up to Toronto, it's easy access to Toronto. If a grower in Ontario wants to ship carrots down to, let's say Ohio during the summer, the months where they don't grow too well, we have access to it there. So it's truly been a win-win situation, and both countries have benefited. It saves us money when we do work. It saves them money when we do work because we do work together. So it truly is. So anyways, I missed that critical component, but more on the larger international basis, it's probably been about 15 years.
Well, you just mentioned a bunch of different specialty crops in talking about trades with Canada. I guess my next question for you is I'm hesitant. I was going to ask the broad umbrella question of what crops do you work with, but I'm sensing that it's a lot of different crops. Yep. So, I mean, however you want to attack that. I mean, do you guys have groups of crops? Do you guys, I'm sure the list is long of specialty crops you guys work with, but in general, what crops do you work with?
Apples to zucchini. Okay. So there's over 1,000 specialty crops grown in the United States and many more grown worldwide. We can't do work on everything. So one of the ways that we have been successful in making sure that these crops are covered is we have taken the leadership in North America in developing crop groups. So crop groups are technically just a logical grouping of commodities where you develop data on a few crops and that is extrapolated to many crops. Think of cucurbits, okay?
Yep.
So oftentimes we'll develop data on cucumbers, we'll develop data on cantaloupe, we'll develop data on squash. And if the data and the proposed use is relatively the same, we can then get 40 or so other cucurbit crops. Now that's an easy understanding because they're all cucurbits. Right. But sometimes the crop groups are not botanically related. So think about the root crops, okay? So we've developed root crops where if you develop data on sweet potatoes, which is I'll get into the weeds, so to speak, an epimea, that's tropical sweet potato. But there's many different root crops that can be utilized. Sure. Or utilized. So it may be across many different genera, many different species. So it takes a little logic. It takes a little bit of knowledge of crop production. So that's where that horticulture degree has really come into play.
Yeah.
So we IR4, as I said, we've taken the leadership with US EPA in developing these extrapolation models. So we'll develop the models and then we'll submit it to them and they'll look at the models and say if they're good or not so good. And, it's a good give and take. The organization ourselves have published a couple books. Food and Feed Crops of the United States is the latest version. It's about 10 years out of date, but we're working on the third edition at this point, where it's going to be listing all these crops, what groups they belong to, and what's the characteristics of the crop. So it is a good reference document. So that's been a fun part of my job of working with the crop groups and the success we've had. And by the way, these crop groups have been internationalized. So we've taken what has been approved in the US and Canada and have submitted it to the Codex, the North American crop groups to Codex, and they've established very similar crop groups. So it can be now being used anywhere in the world.
Thank you so much for listening to part one of my podcast here with Jerry Barron, the Executive Director of the IR4 program. Make sure you tune in next week to hear part two. Thanks again for listening, folks. We'll see you next time.
I See Dead Plants bridges the gap between plant science research and the impact it has on our daily lives. It is brought to you by the Crop Protection Network and the North Central Integrated Pest Management Center, which are both partially supported by the USDA National Institute of Food and Agriculture. For more information on today's topic or other pest management issues, check out our show notes, cropprotectionnetwork.org or ntipmc.org. Remember, this information is for entertainment purposes only. The statements made in this podcast should be interpreted within the limited context of the particular topics being discussed. Contact your state extension program for local information on pest management. For the full non-discrimination statement or for accommodation inquiries, go to cropprotectionnetwork.org/about. Thank you for listening to I See Dead Plants.